So we're back. I wanted to start off this second installment of our treatment of Raisin in the Sun by talking about the very large African music scene at the very beginning of Act Two. It seems, in a way, comic and even ridiculous because Walter is extremely drunk and he doesn't come into the scene looking very dignified. But the scene really has some significance in that there's kind of like an eerie overcoming of Walter, and the fact that he participates in this with his sister Benita, who he has been in very tough conflict with, and he's very jealous about her getting, having his education, and that his mother is going to give her some of the money for medical school. So he has been at odds with her like earlier in the play, and he comes in drunk, and all of a sudden there's this African music, and I think this is before, right before the beginning of this page, where he says, "I'm really digging those drums. Then those drums speak to me." And so it begins by looking kind of ridiculous, but then all of a sudden Benita, who it says, he's looking at his sister's face. She has stopped dancing to watch him in this unknown mood. She's kind of fascinated with this, and so the hostility between them has kind of stopped for the moment, and she starts cheering him on in his what begins as a drunken whatever, he begins with, "I am much warrior," and hot damn, he says. But as it goes on, and with Benita's encouragement, there seems to be something kind of magical happening to him. And it's ironic in that Benita is the one who is into the African roots movement, and Walter has earlier in the play kind of dismissed it. He's much more of an assimilationist in trying to be like the white people who have the money and who have the power. But there's something that overcomes him here that turns from being ridiculous into something that has more dignity. All right, so some of these African phrases are, they seem kind of comical, and if you know, Owimawe is that word, it comes from that song, "In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight." So this is what Walter is kind of referring to here. So he sees, and the stage directions, I think, are very specific here, and I think that it's clear then that the author does mean to show us that something more dignified has overcome Walter. He sees what we cannot, that he is the leader of his people. He has been anything but a leader of people earlier in the play. But so I think that what the author is trying to get through here is that part of what has been bringing Walter down is that he has been forced to be someone that he is not. There's something even a little bit eloquent about some of the things. I mean, all this is just being made up in his head, but do you hear the waters rushing against the shores of the coastlands? Do you hear the screeching of the cocks in yonder hills? I mean, it's almost poetic, I guess, even though it does sound like someone who's pretty drunk. On the next page, we get another indication from the playwright, the author, that she wants us to see that this is not just comic. I mean, so look at this, the stage directions here. And now the lighting shifts subtly to suggest the world of Walter's imagination, and the mood shifts from pure comedy into the inner Walter speaking. The South Side chauffeur has assumed an unexpected majesty. That's a really strong word, majesty there. But he keeps on going, and Benita keeps on urging him on, "O como garcier," and he, do you hear the singing of the women singing war songs, blah blah blah. But then, beneath her here, completely gone. She's really pushed him because she sees something that is positive about him. So I think there's a lot to be said for this one scene showing part of what the oppression of this family is, and especially of Walter, because he has had something dignified taken away from him. Okay, then from here, I wanted to maybe return to the relationships between the characters. So we've talked about that already in the last video, um, but a lot of really hurtful things are said between these characters, and there's just a lot of negativity. And one of the things I really appreciated, a number of you in your discussion board comments have focused not only on the fact that their poverty, I mean, their poverty is pretty extreme, but the space. They're so confined in that tiny little apartment, and they have to share a bathroom with their neighbor in the hallway. I mean, just how damaging it must be. And so I kind of wanted to look a little bit deeper into these relationships to ask the question about what if things were not so bad? Are there more positive things that we can see between them? Were they once a happier family? Or I guess even more important for the end of the play is, if they do get their feet up on the ground and get a house, will they thrive more as a family? So in this scene that we were just looking at, we saw how Walter and Benita are kind of teaming up for a moment. I mean, their hostility is not going to be gone, and as soon as Walter gets sober again, he's probably going to be very mean to her again. But there is a moment of teamwork here, appreciation of each other, and I think that there are other places in the play where there is an affection that I think the author wants us to see, just to say that there is a love in this family. There is potential. If you look at the early one of the early scenes between Ruth and Travis, I mean, she's given Travis such a hard time, but before he goes out to school, she can't let him leave without making him be affectionate and say goodbye to her and give her a hug and everything. So I wanted to focus on this other scene here with Walter, and in the book it's on page 88 and 89 with Walter and Ruth. Previous to this scene, I mean, or just or in the pages right before this, they had been really going at it. They had been really going at it, and Walter's really said some hurtful things. And in fact, he had said a little while ago, who cares about you? But all of a sudden, the mood changes, and we get a sense that these are two people that do love one another. They've been disappointed, and they can't. They've tried to do something for each other, but it's too hard. So Walter says, "It's been rough, ain't it, baby? I guess between two people, there ain't never as much understood as folks generally thinks there is. I mean, like between you and me." And so again, the stage directions. She turns to face him. How we get to the place where we scared to talk softness to each other. I kind of like that line, to talk softness to each other. What do you think? Why do you think it got to be like that? Ruth, what is it gets into people ought to be close? I don't know, honey. I think about it a lot. And then Ruth goes on, there ain't so much between us, Walter. Not when you come to me and try to talk to me, try to be with me, a little even. They're trying to find some common ground here. And Walter, total honesty, sometimes I don't even know how to try. then Ruth, I mean, I think I like in this longer speech that she has here, she kind of makes this reference to that. They used to think about the kind of house they were going to get. Honey, we don't have to be like this. I mean, sometimes people can do things so that things are better. You remember how we used to talk when Travis was born about the way we were going to live, the kind of house, that they were going to live in. And now they're living with the rest of their family, in her mother's house, and that's all they have. So just think of all that stress, all that tension. So he turns to him. He turns her to him, and they look at each other and kiss tenderly and hungrily. The door opens and Mom enters. Okay, so there is this great mood, and they're coming together finally, and it's really good to see them together. And then Mama comes in. She's been gone all day, going to buy a house, and Walter has been really pissed off because he kind of knows what she's up to. So Mama is going to proceed with getting a down payment on that house, and most of the rest of the family is pretty excited about it. Ruth is extremely happy, and Benita's pretty excited too. I want to go toward the scene where Mr. Lindner comes in, which is another important scene. But before that, I just want to say a few words about the scene. If you look at the footnote on page 98, it's the scene with Mrs. Johnson in it. And the footnote tells you that in early, her character and this scene with her visit was cut from the early production and early editions of the play. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. I kind of think it was a good idea to cut it because Mrs. Johnson is really kind of a ridiculous and exaggerated character, and she's added only for this one scene. So I think in terms of playwriting, some people would say that, I mean, is she needed? I mean, what's the message that she has? She is the one who brings in a newspaper and shows, the family and the audience at the same time that there have been bombings in neighborhoods where black people try to move into white neighborhoods. And so one thing is, another reason why I don't think it's really quite that necessary is that there have been references, one or two at least, to bombings before this. It just seems like the Mrs. Johnson scene is really so unsubtle in terms of, making the bombing so explicit. Then comes the arrival of Lindner and a new twist to the plot. So what is he there for? Why? He's part of a neighborhood association at Clybourne Park, and he's been kind of enlisted to go and try to talk them out of moving there. And so he's empowered actually to offer them more money than they put down on the house to not come and move in. So it's a very blatant racist situation here. It takes him a long time to get going because he keeps on getting interrupted, and he keeps on trying to. I mean, he's anticipating that it's not going to go well, and so he's hemming and hawing, and the younger family is kind of thinking that maybe he is there to be welcoming, he keeps on talking about it. People just sit down and talk to each other. But that's not really the case. And he has a few quite long speeches, and I'm going to look at this one here with you, which is, I think, on page 117 in our text, in case you're following along. Well, he says, and Lindner is a very sort of gentle and kind of nervous soul. In the really old movie with Sidney Poitier in it, the person who played Lindner was, I think his name is Sterling Holloway, who was the voice of Piglet in the Winnie the Pooh cartoons. Anyway, But he says, well, you see, our community is made up of people who've worked hard as the Dickens for years to build up that little community. They're not rich and fancy people, just hardworking, honest people who really don't have much. But those little homes and a dream of the kind of community they want their children to have. Yeah, so that important word dream. Um, um, the dream deferred. A lot of people on different sides have using that word dream, and so we have the dream deferred. We have the American dream that has been a thematic part of our work this semester too. So now I don't say that we are perfect, and there is a lot wrong with some of the things that they want, but you've got to admit that a man, right or wrong, has the right to want to have the neighborhood he lives in a certain kind of way. Yeah, so he's really hemming and hawing here. And at the moment, the overwhelming majority of our people out there feel that people get along better, take more common interest in the life of the community when they share a common background. I want you to believe me when I tell you that race prejudice simply does not enter into it. What? It is a matter of the people of Clybourne Park believing, rightly or wrongly, as I say, that for the happiness of all concerned, that our Negro families are happier when they live in their own communities. Yikes. And he does imply that bad things happen sometimes when black families move into white communities. And beneath it says, this, friends, is the welcoming committee. And so they're getting pretty upset. And he says, well, now, we've been having a fine conversation. I hope you'll hear me through all the way. All right, so, okay. One last thing about this scene is that this presents the second big irony of the story. Now, we mentioned last time that the check for $10,000, which should be something that brought the family together, gave them happiness and joy, but it was just the bone of contention between them. But now they are presented with this really this racial danger in the new neighborhood, which should be a really bad thing. But what it does is brings the whole family together. It unites them. So I think that's another really great moment of irony. Okay, so I think that's all I'm going to do for now. Next Tuesday, I'll have another video available for our third day on this play. And I will be sending you an update and sending a question for the discussion board. So look for that. I hope everybody is healthy and safe, and I hope you can have as good a weekend as possible under the circumstances. So talk to you soon.